All right.
Welcome to the Earning Freedom Program. I got my man. He is a superstar. This is Rodney White. I'm so excited to share his story with you because he's a man that went to prison quite young, but that didn't stop him. He learned how to become successful, and he's been an inspiration to me, and I know he's going to be an inspiration to you. Why don't we start off, Rodney, by just telling us a little bit about yourself. What brought you into the criminal justice system?
Well, Mike, I started selling drugs at a young age. I went into prison. I did 15 and a half years in federal prison, straight bit. I went in, I think it was about 26 years old. I got out when I was 42 years old. At that time, I took a lot of little classes, ACE classes. I took a few college classes here and there when they offered them. But pretty much, I didn't have much of an education as far as academically. But what being in prison did, it taught me what I like to consider now, and having a master's in adult education, was self-directed learning. And that's one of the key components of adult education, because so much of what you can learn, you really can learn on your own, through reading books. Just basically, I read a book by Jack Canfield called The Success Principles. And he pointed out the fact that if you just read any particular subject for 30 minutes a day, over a period of, say, a year or so, you would actually become as well read as any other scholar in that field, because basically people in working in the field are not taking on that amount of information. So that time that I spent 23-1 and, being in lockdown, it gave me the opportunity to just really do a lot of reading. And a lot of the reading that I did when I got into college and finally got an education, a lot of the books that I read in prison, I found out to be those books that were used in some of my college classes, such as Good to Great. That was one of the books that I had read in prison.
Well, let's take it back a little bit because, you're talking about somebody who's full of wisdom and somebody who's really mastered the art of success, but I don't think it probably didn't start out that way. And a lot of our brothers that are watching this, they're right now on lockdown. They're in the SMU unit, they're in SHU, they're in high security prisons, and they're just trying to figure out, how am I going to do it? How did Rodney break that cycle? But why don't we take it a little slower? Okay. You tell me a little about what was your initial adjustment like when you went into the penitentiary?
Wow. Well, going in at that time, I started off in USP Terre Haute, which, as they used to call it, a young gladiator school. And basically, you get the information is get a haircut and get a knife, because that's just the level of I guess, a risk factor that it was. Now, some of the best information that I got was not just get a knife and get a haircut, but go in that law library. And in going in the law library, well, education is housed in the law library. So just going in every day looking at my case gave me the ability to go into education every day. So therefore, one of the first things that I think that I mastered was my mind. Because you can't lift enough weights. You can't play enough checkers. You can't play enough chess to do 15 and a half years. You've got to do something with your mind. So I think one of my greatest, strengths was my ability to take information from other people and be coachable, because there were some good men in prison with me who said, hey, young brother, you need to get in this. You need to get in this law library. You need to get an education, because at that time I went in with a lot of men who had old law time. They had parolable dates. And so me with a 2007, 2009 release date, they told me I had Buck Rogers time. I didn't even know who Buck Rogers was at that time. But these were older heads. As they said, these were convicts who saw a lot of the younger guys coming in under this new drug law. And so, they basically said to me, the only way that you're going to survive this is through education. And all the men that I saw at that time who had done a great amount of time, that was in the USPs, because again, USPs was reserved for those with tremendously long sentences or violent offenders. And a lot of times they would send young guys in there just to kind of break them down, to give them a taste of the hard stuff. And I think I got kind of caught up in that. So I think one of the biggest things that I can tell these men right now is when that book cart comes around, you grab something off of it. When that library request comes around, you put something down there, something beyond just the Westerns and the ghetto novels and all that. Put something down there that's going to enrich your outlook, something that's going to give you a positive experience every day, because that's what it boils down to. You've got to be putting something in your mind that's going to come out positive. So That's my biggest challenge to them right now. Is when that book card comes around, pull something off that is positive.
Rodney, how long were you in prison before you started to get that level of wisdom to reject the criminal lifestyle?
I'm almost embarrassed to say, and I'll tell you why. Because although, I was hanging around the library, I was going into the law library, I was doing this and that, I still was wanting to play poker. I still wanted to try to get the police to bring something in there to me. So I did almost 13 years of just foolishness. Those last 2 years is when I really took this thing serious, and I tell it like this. I went to unit team, and that's that last 2 years, you hitting the 24 months, 18 months is when they started doing pre-release. And at that time, up until that, I'm not even thinking about release, because other than that, I would blow team off. Like, look, I got nothing coming. Why am I even going to team? Just send me the sheet of paper, I'll sign it, because at that point, it was nothing for me to talk about. But those last 2 years, Mike, it got crucial, Mike, because I'm going to tell you what my wake-up call was. When they say give us a release address, I'm going to be honest with you, Mike, I didn't have one. I legitimately did not have a release address. Now, that didn't mean that I didn't know anybody I could go stay with, but it was not my address, Mike. The home that I had was taken by the government. So I would literally have to take, and I told them put that address down there, but I had to get on the phone that night and make some phone calls to legitimately see if there was someone I could go and live with. So that was a wake-up call to me, because I'm saying if I don't get my act right, if I don't do the right things right now, then I'm going to come back to prison because I don't have a solid plan in place to have a place to live. So that was a wake-up call for me.
And that's one of the reasons that I wanted you to come on our program, because you're going to help more guys inside wake up earlier. Had you gotten that message during your first year in prison instead of in your last years of imprisonment, how would that have influenced the way that you served your time?
Well, I'll tell you how I would have. A lot of the things, like, I'll give you an example. I lost 27 days 4 times. Guys know that. They know what the 27 mean, because that's the amount that they can take, the maximum they can take off any charge. Well, here's 2 parts to this, Mike. Had I known what I know, I would have gotten my level dropped down. I would have behaved myself. I would have had good conduct, so that I would have been at the facilities that had the better education program. Instead, I looked like I was trying to go to every max facility that I could get to as a badge of honor. It's like, my attitude was like, I don't want to go to those punk-ass spots. I don't want to go there. There's a bunch of babies, a bunch of rats, a bunch of snitches. But guess what? That's where the education programs were. So I needed to conduct myself in such a way that, hey, I could get to the lower level facilities. But here's the real one right here, Mike. I have a daughter that's serving 19 to 25 for a drug-related murder that was committed 2 weeks, Mike, before I went home. Now, I know in my heart of hearts, if I'd have been home for those 2 weeks, she would not have been out there selling drugs or killing anybody. So losing that good time at the end, it meant something. So right now, you're in the shoe, you're in the hole, you up top, whatever you want to call it, at the joint that you at, those 27 days meant something to me at the end. And one thing that I say now that I want to say to you is, guard that date. If you got an actual date, if they're on a calendar and you can look at a date, guard that date. Stay away from the bit runner uppers. Those ones going to make you run that number up. But sometimes you run it up yourself. So I ran mine up a little bit and somebody helped me run it up again. I take responsibility for that. But I'm going to tell you, Mike, I would have conducted myself much better had I known I could have worked my level down, got to lower level facilities, had better education opportunities. I know I would have did a better bit, and I know I would have been home to help save my daughter from a 19 to 25-year-old bit that she's doing right now for a drug-related murder.
There are so many stories like that where we see somebody going into the prison and then becomes this intergenerational cycle. Absolutely. And it's our job as people who've come back successfully, Rodney, to try and spread that message inside to kind of stop the madness and get more people thinking about what you learned during your last couple of years. And Absolutely. Maybe now you could tell us a little bit about how you shifted your adjustment during those last couple of years. How were you able to stop focusing on living inside of a high security pen, instead start focusing on going to school and getting ready?
Well, first of all, I got into the Life Connections program. That was the faith-based program. And I'm not going to sit here and preach religion or anything, because truly that was not my motive. I got into it because they had it at an FCI that was close to my home. It had it at FCI Petersburg. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. They had it. And I was out in Kentucky at the time. And I was like, hey, I got to get close to home. And I got in the program, signed up, did everything I could do to get in the program, and got there because I wanted to be closer to home when I left prison, not knowing that once I got in that program, I would have an abundance amount of time to study. I would have cognitive programming, where therapeutic programming, where now I'm thinking for a change. You know, I'm doing all the programs, I'm doing victim impacts. I'm taking classes, I'm working on me. That was the main thing. I started working and focusing on how I was thinking, how I was acting, even how I was reacting to situations. So that played a big part in it, in just doing positive programs. Up until that point, you know, it was called a faith-based program, and they talking about how much more drugs was in the drug program than on anywhere in the compound, you know, that kind of thing. So, you know, there are a lot of hypocrites that get involved in it. There are a lot of people that talk about the programs that don't know. But I tell you, I went into that Life Connections program. I embraced it. I put 100% into it, and I got 1,000% out of it.
Also listening to people who've been there and come
Absolutely.
back and been able to land on their feet. And that's why Rodney is such an inspiration, because he didn't only go through those programs, he started creating those programs.
Absolutely.
And people started paying him to use his programs, and universities started to hire him. And he's just got this amazing success story that we all can learn from. And that's why I'm so grateful to him for sharing this story. So now why don't you tell us, you've given us the sorrow about losing those that first decade in prison. You've given us the success of how you turned your life around, and then the sorrow of seeing that your daughter is going into this system, but you still didn't give up. You were able to come back to society and make things happen. And I'd love for you to share with our audience what you experienced after coming back to society after a time in high security penitentiaries.
Well, one of the things that I want them to know and understand is that, you know, a resume is not going to work for you in getting a job. You're not going to be able to come out here, fill out a resume, fill out this big job application, and go get a job that's going to pay you a whole bunch of money. That's not going to happen. But what will happen is this: for you to understand that if you're not networking, you're not working. What do I mean by that? We're judged by our name. So I will tell a lot of men and women that come out of prison, and I will say, hey, how many of you know somebody that's out there selling drugs? And they'll raise their hand. I say, so if you wanted to buy drugs, you already know who to contact before you even get there if you want those drugs. And they'll raise their hands. And then I'll say, how many of you know somebody out there that left prison that have a job, that's working somewhere? And where are they working? And they'll start telling me, oh, they're doing this, they're doing that. I say, how are they doing? I'll say, oh, I hear they're doing pretty good. So contact that person first before you leave and start saying, hey, I need a job. I'm coming home. So you start building that network. That's what I did. I had a friend of mine who had gone out and started his own company, and I reached out to him. I said, hey, you know, I need a job. And his name's Jerry Clark, and he's very successful now. He has his own construction company. He's doing very well. But when I got out, Jerry had a janitorial business, and Jerry gave me my first job. And he had been an ex-offender, a returning citizen, a convict, whatever you want to call it. You know, that was him. And he gave me an opportunity. So I say that to the men in there. Reach out to some of the other men and women who you know, who've gone out and done positive things, and make that your first connection. Because skills transfer. If they know you're a good guy or a good woman, then they're going to look out for you. But if you're not, then you got some time to work on your character, build your name up, and do something positive. That's one part. So I got a job as a janitor, saved my money, started working for DirecTV, started selling cars, because I felt like if I could sell dope, I could sell cars. If I felt like I could sell dope, I could sell anything. I just had the wrong product. So I started selling cars, and I truly believe skills transfer. If you can steal a car, you can build a car. You can work on a car. So if you have some type of mechanical or you're mechanically inclined, or you are good with numbers or bookkeeping, then find something out here that relates to that same field and get a job in it and put your passion towards it. So that's one of the things that I capitalized on because I believe that a good crook can change his look. In the fact that, that's what the convicts used to say. If an old bank robber told me that a long time ago. He said, hey, I didn't get caught because I could always change my look. So I learned something from that, but I know there's also say, well, is this a new crook with a different look? No, it's not, because I embraced what I'm doing. So a part of my success is in the ability to have network with people. We are who we are, making drug connections, doing big drug deals, as you know, Mike. It's about your connections, who you know. So I made it a practice to get to know people, doing positive things, volunteering. Just volunteering alone got me 2 jobs because I was out there volunteering and I met some people and they opened some doors for me. So that was a big part of my success. One of the things I do right now, I work in a prison. I work for the Virginia Department of Corrections. I'm a full-time staff member working inside of a prison. Recently, I was working in a women's prison. I'm a roving, like a counselor now, on what you call an OWDS, which Offender Workforce Development Specialist. It's my job to help men and women leaving prisons to find employment, to be successfully employed, and to remain employed successfully, and showing them the skills. And I get paid for this. I have a master's degree in adult education. I went to a 4-year school. I got a bachelor's degree. I graduated with honors on both degrees. And I'm not saying this to brag to anybody. I'm saying this because this is the passion that I have for helping my people. You're my people. I'm you and you're me all day and every day. So, me coming in, and I love the state of Virginia for this, because the state of Virginia has the highest, we have the lowest, let me turn around, the lowest recidivism rate. We have the highest number of returning citizens going out and staying out and being successfully employed. And one of the reasons why is because Virginia does not mind taking that progressive stance to hire returning citizens, to hire ex-offenders to come back into prison, such as what you do, Mike. You go in electronically. I go in physically to go in and talk to these men and women about the success and what they need to do. And I've also created a DVD with that, and I'm thinking you shared the link and all that before.
I did. I'm going to share it again. Could you tell us a little bit about how you developed that DVD and how you brought it to market?
Well, this is how I developed it. I developed it in prison because a part of what I wanted to do was put together a plan, which I called READ. READ is an acronym for taking responsibility for your life, learning to react instead of responding. E is your education and your environment. A is attitude, adjusting and asking. And D is determination and discipline. So I used that as my success formula in prison. But when I got out of prison, I started going to schools, started going to prisons and talking about it. People wanted to hear my story. But here's the big thing. A lot of men and women will often ask me, hey, Rodney, I want to do what you do. They'll say you want to do it. And I'm like, okay, but in order to have a testimony, you got to pass some tests. So by being gainfully employed, since I've been out of prison from day one, going back to school, getting 2 degrees, working, doing volunteer work, that was my test. That was my passing of a test. So therefore, the testimony was easy. But if you just want to walk out of prison and say, hey, I want to tell my story because I've been locked up 28 years, man, you're not Mandela, okay? So, unless you want to go and become the president of the country or something, you need to basically first get out, prove yourself. The same way you get to prove it in the joint, the same way you get to prove it in the game, get out here and prove yourself. Then you start telling your story. Then you start putting together. I started sending the DVD out free. I was just sending it to places. A company called FMS Productions. They do Michael Johnson. They do Hollywood Henderson. They do all those big guys. They contacted me and says, hey, we want to sell your video. They paid me up front like 10 grand. Yeah, the 10 stacks. That's what I'm talking about. They paid me 10 stacks for the right to distribute it. Didn't owe them anything, and 7% residual. That's the deal I got. Standard deal. Again, nothing to brag about. I'm not sitting here saying, hey, blowing myself up. I've bet 10 stacks on a roll of the dice before. So I'm not sitting here, trying to make that seem big. But what I want to tell you is that's passive income. That's your ability to be able, every 3 months, there's going to be a check in my mailbox that I don't have to move. I don't do anything. So that's just showing you how to create passive income. Those books you see in the background, Mike, those are for Mike, that's passive income. Those books sell. He's going to get money. He only had to write those books one time, and continually get income. So if you have an idea, you have something when you think about in prison, then you start looking for passive income streams that can come in, and you never have to lift your finger again, and that'll just be money coming in. So, Mike, I applaud you on that in creating those passive income streams.
Well, Rodney, I learned from guys like you. It was guys like you that inspired me through prison. You inspired me since I've been home. I'm just so grateful to you for sharing this story, because I know a lot of people who are locked up do want to do what you have done, but sometimes they don't see how hard you have worked to get to be the man that you are. You were complete. You had a 100% commitment with the right attitude. You had a vision of becoming successful. That was your aspiration. You took the incremental action steps by joining the Life Skills program, by separating yourself from the mentality of the penitentiary. Right. And you held yourself accountable. You said, this is what I'm going to do every day to get to where I need to go. And because of that, you took a job as a janitor, a job as a car dealer. I know you worked for the college. Now you're working for the system. You've got different business organizations wanting to partner with you and pay you money because they see the value in what you have created. But that did not happen overnight. No. That happened because while you were in prison, you started sowing seeds for success. Absolutely. And that's the message that I need your help in communicating to these guys inside, because if you have become this successful, they can become successful too, but they got to listen to everything you're saying, not just that people are paying you 10 grand, not just that you're creating passive income, but how you eventually light went on, you started holding yourself accountable, you developed confidence in your ability to do things, you started seeing the world from a different perspective, and that's why Rodney White is one of the most successful guys that's ever come out of the prison system, so successful that prison staff members are now saying, hey, can we pay you, give you full benefits to come into our institution and teach? And that's what's amazing.
Yes. One of the things I do want to leave the brothers and sisters with is this, Mike. One of the best pieces of advice of wisdom that I got was from a gentleman named David Jackson. He had served a life sentence and had given it back on appeal. And I asked one day, I said, Mr. J, we were in Memphis at this time. We were in FCI Memphis. And I asked him and said, Mr. J, give me the best advice that you can give me. You're going out. You had a life sentence. You gave it back on appeal. You fought it. You know, he had done time in Marion and all these places. But, you know, when you hear guys been to Marion, I mean, this was Marion back in the day, not Marion Camp. I'm talking about when Marion was Marion, you know, before the ADXs and all this. You know, this was old. And he said, you know, one of the best, he told me, he said, embrace change. He said, that's what you have to do. You can't run from it. You can't hide it. You've got to embrace change. So I say to these men and women that's coming out, that's listening, embrace change. Change is inevitable. You know, you got to be constantly learning. You have to be a lifelong learner. And that's what I discovered. I discovered when I walked out of prison, I was behind. There was no internet when I went to prison. I hadn't been on a computer or anything. I had to come out and learn those things. So one thing I'll say to you, become a lifelong learner. If anything that you can learn, any skill, become bilingual, whatever learning that you can get in education you can get while you're in prison, get it. Because even people out here who've had jobs for 20 years and 30 years, guess what? They're changed. They don't want to change. They're losing jobs because they don't want to learn computer skills. They don't want to learn new job skills. So be ahead of the curve. If you really want to make it, become a lifelong learner. Then you'll make it. I don't care whether it's prison or not. You're going to make it if you become a lifelong learner.
And one of the things that you can take to the bank when you're listening to Rodney talk is that he's 100% authentic. He never asks anybody to do anything that he didn't do and that he's not doing right now. You can see he's filming this in his room right now, but look at that beautiful home. Look at that beautiful door. Look at all those books behind him.
Yes.
He's letting you know, I'm always learning. I'm always.
You can't even see my other books over there. That's the neat look. I had to turn it around because I got books and papers. But, you know, I'll say something else, you know, about that, you know, in being that, you know, being that lifelong learner and coming out and putting things into practice. You know, you've learned a great discipline being in prison. You know, prison has taught you a lot. You know, and not everything you've learned is bad. You can come out and discipline yourself and come out here and make it. But you've got to also be willing to change that environment, to get around another group of people, to basically, people, places, and things, as they say. You've got to be able to do that. But you've got to embrace that change, and you have to be ready to change your environment, and change the way you think. That makes a big difference, Mike. I'm 10 years in the making. I stepped out of prison February 21st, 2007, okay? So this didn't happen overnight for me. My first couple of years, again, hey, I was living it, didn't go out, didn't party, didn't take vacations. I was working full-time. I was going to school full-time for 7 straight year. So this is not, I don't want anybody to look at me and say, oh, man, he got out and wrote this DVD, and wow, he was in it. No, it didn't happen that way. It didn't happen that way. There's no quick come up. You don't cut the line, okay? You understand what I'm saying? Because in those real joints, real men don't cut lines, so you don't cut the line. I didn't cut the line. I didn't jump in front of nobody to get here, okay? I waited my turn. It's my turn. It's my time, and I'm doing what I got to do, and I'm enjoying it, okay? And I'm not risking going back to lose it for anybody, But I'm not here to brag or boast and tell you, oh, yeah, I got it, and I'm going to tell you what I'm driving and parked outside. That's not me. What's me is what you see in the back, those books. Education put me here. That's what put me here. Being an educated man in America, that's what put me here.
And you know what? That all started inside of a prison cell. It started for Rodney. It can start for you as well. Absolutely. I'm so grateful to you, Rodney, for spending this Sunday afternoon with me so we could reach inside of the penitentiary and inspire more guys to come out just as successfully as you have.
Absolutely. Listen, brother. Listen, sister. Anything that I can do, Mike will put up my email address. He'll put the information there. I have no problem corresponding with anybody. I really don't. If you want to reach out for some information, advice, now sending you money, that might be something a little different. Advice and information. But I'll tell you this, something that I learned early on. Ideas. You read Think and Grow Rich. Ideas are your greatest gifts. What you think about, the things that you put together right now in that cell. Because I'm going to tell you what Ralph Ellison said in Invisible Man. A little isolation won't hurt you. You got some time right now to think about some things, be creative about some things, and you can put those things together and you can bring them and manifest them, bring them to fruition when you get out here. That's what I did, and that's what you can do. Got nothing but love for you. Keep doing what you do. I'm here for you.
You heard it from the master. Grab a book from that book cart and make it happen. We'll be back with another inspiring guest soon. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.